No one believed a fat girl could carry anything at all, until the day she carried her own fate and changed everything. Iron Creek, Colorado, 1885. In this little mountain town, every cruel joke always seemed to start at the boarding house, the place where the unwanted ended up. Evelyn Hart had lived there for 2 years. And for 2 years, she'd been everyone's favorite target. Her heavy frame, her slow steps, the way her cheeks burned whenever someone called her name, those became punchlines for every sneer and every laugh. Evelyn learned to lower her head, to stay quiet, to take the mockery as if it were just her lot in life. But deep inside, there was one thing no one could break: her endurance. One night, the young women huddled around the fireplace, passing a notice scrawled in thick black ink. Help wanted. Blacksmith Samuel Pike. Wages paid daily. The room erupted in laughter. Who in their right mind would dare work for Samuel Pike? Folks called him the old wolf of Iron Creek, a former soldier with scarred hands, a temper like fire, and no patience for weakness. No man lasted a week under him, much less a woman. "Send Evelyn!" one of the girls jeered, eyes darting to the corner where Evelyn sat patching an old dress. "She's big enough to carry the forge hammer without stopping." The room roared with laughter. Evelyn's head sank lower, her heart racing. She wanted to say no, she wanted to run. But fear of being thrown out into the snow with nowhere to go, kept her silent. That night, lying on her creaking attic bed, Evelyn stared at the dark ceiling. The cruel words circled in her head. Too fat, too clumsy, can't do anything. But she didn't cry. She whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I'll prove them wrong." The next morning, winter fog clung to the streets. Evelyn pulled her thin sweater tight and trudged toward the forge. The cobblestone path was icy, the snow deep, and every step felt like she was dragging the weight of the whole world. But as smoke rose from Samuel Pike's chimney, a fire lit in her eyes. The forge door creaked open. There he was, Samuel Pike, broad-shouldered, towering, eyes cold as steel. He scowled at the sight of her. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice trembling but firm. "They sent me to help. I need this job." Samuel studied her, then let out a rough laugh, sharp, joyless. "They sent you as a joke, but if you want to work, then grab a broom. Don't whine. Don't stop. This ain't a place for the weak." Her hands shook as she gripped the broom's worn wooden handle. The fire in the forge glared back at her, painting her face in red. Maybe Samuel thought she wouldn't last an hour. Maybe the whole town thought the same. But Evelyn knew one thing: she had no way back. And from that moment, the cruelest joke in Iron Creek became the beginning of a story no one could have imagined. In Iron Creek, every cruel joke always seemed to start with the pretty girls at the boarding house, their thin smiles hiding sharp little daggers. Evelyn Hart knew that routine all too well. The night before, they'd been huddled by the fire, passing around a notice scrawled in bold black ink. Help wanted. Assistant at Samuel Pike's forge. Wages paid daily. Laughter erupted. "Perfect job for her!" one girl screeched. "She's big enough to haul coal, swing a hammer, maybe even carry the whole forge on her back. That size has to be good for something, right?" The room exploded with laughter. Sharp, merciless, echoing against the walls until Evelyn wished she could vanish into the floorboards. She clutched the half-mended shirt in her lap, the needle trembling in her hand as her heart pounded. "Well, Evelyn?" Another girl teased, her voice sugary but her eyes mean. "You'll go, won't you?" Evelyn bit her lip until it bled. The answer she wanted to give was no. But the stern face of the boarding mistress flashed in her mind. That woman had said it plain. Anyone who doesn't work, doesn't stay. This isn't a charity house. Evelyn knew the truth. If she refused, within days she'd be out on the frozen streets, with nowhere to go. So she nodded. The laughter only grew louder, crueler. That night, lying in her drafty attic room, Evelyn replayed their jeers in her head. She'll break the floorboards at the forge. Bet the chair snaps the second she sits. The words cut like blades, but she didn't cry. She stared at the wooden ceiling, her hand gripping a scrap of cloth pressed tight to her chest. And in the silence, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow. I won't run anymore." Morning came gray and bitter. Fog clung to the mountain slopes, biting at exposed skin. Evelyn pulled on her threadbare wool dress, wrapped her frayed shawl tight, and stepped into the snow. Her feet froze in worn-out shoes, but she kept walking. At the edge of town stood the forge. The clang of hammer on iron rang like thunder, the smell of hot steel and coal filling the air. Evelyn's chest tightened with every step closer, until her heart pounded so hard it hurt. The door to the forge swung open. Samuel Pike filled the frame. A giant of a man, shoulders broad as an ox, beard thick, eyes cold and hard as hammered steel. He scowled at her. "What are you doing here?" His voice rasped like metal grinding on stone. Evelyn swallowed, clutching the crumpled notice in her fist. They sent me. I came to help. I need the work." Samuel looked her up and down, his stare cutting through her patched clothes, through her trembling stance. Then he gave a short, harsh laugh. "A joke. That's what this is. A damn joke." Her cheeks flamed, her head dropped. But then, through the fear, her voice slipped out, soft but steady. I need this job. Please, let me try." The air between them froze. Samuel studied her a long moment, then his eyes softened just enough. He jerked his chin toward the corner where a broom leaned against the wall. "If you want to work, start there. Sweep every inch of this mess. No whining, no quitting. Last a day, and we'll talk." Evelyn drew a long, shaky breath, then stepped inside. Her hand gripped the broom handle tight. The forge fire glowed against her face, and in that light, her fear burned into something harder. For the first time in her life, Evelyn Hart wasn't running from their laughter. She was walking straight into it. The forge roared like a beast. Coals burned blood red in the hearth, and every strike of Samuel Pike's hammer cracked through the air like thunder rolling down from the mountains. Sweat dripped down Evelyn's face, even though outside, winter frost clung like glass to the window frame. The broom in her hands trembled with every heartbeat, but she kept going, sweeping ash, scraping metal shards, pushing soot into piles. Her fingers, more used to holding a needle and thread, blistered raw against the rough wooden handle. Her back screamed with each bend. Every stroke felt like it might break her in two. From the corner, Samuel watched. His massive arms swung the blacksmith's hammer, flattening a glowing bar of iron on the anvil. Sparks sprayed across the floor like tiny stars. Now and then, his sharp eyes flicked toward Evelyn, half curious, half doubtful. He'd seen plenty of young men give up before midday. Yet this woman, awkward, heavy-set, clumsy, still hadn't stopped. Then it happened. The clang of a shovel slipping from her hands rang sharp against the stone floor. Evelyn flinched, cheeks burning. I'm sorry," she stammered, voice trembling. Samuel froze mid-swing. The forge quieted for a breath as he looked up. His voice came low and gravelly. "If your hands aren't used to it, use the gloves. Ash and steel will eat skin faster than fire." Evelyn blinked. His tone was rough, yes, but it wasn't scorn, not ridicule. She nodded quickly and slipped on the worn leather gloves he'd pointed to, still intact despite years of use. The hours dragged on. Ash coated her hair, her dress, even her skin. Her breath came heavy, her body aching. The weight of her own frame made every bend, every lift, harder. But Evelyn refused to stop. Inside her mind, the voices of the boarding house girls still sneered. She'll break the forge just by standing in it. Their mockery became fuel, and with each sweep of the broom, she answered them silently. "Watch me." By noon, Samuel set his hammer down with a thud. Wiping the sweat from his brow, he walked toward her, his boots crunching across the stone. "You can stop now," he muttered. "A woman like you must be near spent." Evelyn froze. Her lungs burned, her arms ached, but her eyes, those tired, sweat-streaked eyes, flashed with something harder than fatigue. "I'm not done," she rasped, her voice hoarse but unshaken. "You said clean it. I'll finish it." Samuel stood there, silent. And for the first time, her eyes met his, not darting away, not bowing down. In them, he saw something familiar. Grit. The same grit it took him to survive more winters than he cared to count. He turned back to the anvil, his voice dropping lower. Do what you will, just know. In here, it's work that counts, not words. By evening, the forge looked different. The stone floor was clear, the scrap iron stacked neat, the ash swept into orderly piles. Evelyn leaned against the wall, gasping for air, sweat soaking her dress. Her face flushed red, but her eyes burned bright with pride. Samuel walked the room, his heavy boots tapping against stone that no longer crunched with dirt. He paused, nodded once, slow and deliberate. You did more than I expected, he said, his voice quieter now. Evelyn's throat tightened. Tears pressed against her eyes, but she swallowed them back. Bowing her head, she whispered, "Thank you." And in that moment, in the firelight, between iron and ash, for the first time in her life, Evelyn Hart didn't feel like the punchline of a joke. She felt like she belonged. News in Iron Creek always traveled faster than wind through the valley. And it only took 2 days for word about the fat girl working Samuel Pike's forge to become the hottest joke in town. Inside the Rusty Spur saloon, smoke curled thick beneath the oil lamps. Cowboys lounged with boots on tables, tankards of beer sloshing as they roared with laughter. "You boys here yet?" one of them barked. Old Pike finally took on help. "And it's that big girl from the boarding house." Another man snorted, spilling foam down his vest. "Must be blind as a bat. Bet the chair snaps in two soon as she sits her weight on it." The table erupted with harsh, wheezing cackles. But in the far corner, Harvey Cole didn't laugh. The town's lawyer and pawnbroker sat back, thin smile curling under his mustache. Harvey was known for 2 things, a brain sharper than a straight razor, and a purse that never ran empty. He tapped his fingers slow against the table, eyes narrowing as though he smelled something the others couldn't. "You boys only see a joke," he drawled. "But I see something worth watching. Samuel Pike. Man's lived alone, worked alone, trusted nobody for years. And now suddenly, he keeps that girl in his shop? No, gentlemen, that ain't just chance." A ranch hand frowned. "What are you getting at, Harvey?" Cole swirled his drink, voice smooth as oil. "Folks don't hold on to a joke unless there's more to it. Either Pike needs her more than he lets on, or he's hiding something." The cowboys glanced at each other, chuckles fading into uneasy silence. Meanwhile, back at the forge, Evelyn kept working. Her blistered hands had already begun to toughen, the sting of raw skin giving way to calluses. Day after day, she swept, hauled coal, stacked iron, learning the difference between wrought and cast, listening, watching, enduring. Exhaustion gnawed at her, but beneath her weariness grew something she hadn't felt in years, a flicker of pride. One cold afternoon, Samuel had just finished hammering out a horseshoe nail when a frantic knock rattled the door. Young Jonah, the town's messenger boy, burst in, out of breath. "Mr. Pike, folks at the saloon, they're talking about you and her, saying she's just your charity case, that you keep her around 'cause you pity her." Evelyn froze. The words sliced deep, dragging back every cruel laugh, every whispered insult from the boarding house. Her chest tightened, shame burning hot. She turned, ready to flee the forge, when Pike's voice cracked through the air, low, steady, hard as iron. "Stop!" Evelyn halted mid-step. Samuel laid his hammer aside, wiped soot from his brow, and stepped closer. His eyes, smoke dark, fire-lit, locked on hers. "Let them talk," he said. "They don't know what you've done here. I do. That's what matters." His tone was blunt, even rough. But to Evelyn, it was a lifeline in the storm. Tears blurred her eyes. "But if they think I'm nothing but a burden, won't they drag you down too?" Samuel frowned, not in anger, but in weariness. He gave a short laugh that sounded more like a sigh. "Girl, they've thought me crazy for years. Another reason on the pile won't change a damn thing." A shaky laugh escaped her, breaking into tears that streaked down her soot-stained cheeks. For the first time, Evelyn felt the edge of cruelty dull. For the first time, she wasn't the punchline. But out there, in the smoky haze of the rusty spur, Harvey Cole's smile lingered. While others laughed, he was already scheming, turning gossip into leverage and plotting the kind of game that could pull both Evelyn and Pike into a storm neither of them saw coming. Harvey Cole never wasted an opportunity to turn someone else's life into a pawn for his schemes. The night he first heard the whispers about Evelyn working in Samuel Pike's forge, his eyes had lit up, not with laughter like the other men in the rusty spur, but with the gleam of a man spotting a new game on the table. While the saloon still rattled with crude jokes, Harvey drained his whiskey, set the glass down with a soft clink, and strolled out. His boots echoed across the floorboards, a long shadow stretching behind him. Nobody bothered to notice, but in that quiet exit, real trouble had just begun. The very next morning, the sound of polished shoes cut across the dirt road outside the blacksmith's shop. Harvey Cole arrived at the forge, his tailored coat free of dust, the glint of his watch chain catching the pale winter sun. Inside, soot and iron filled the air as Samuel's hammer struck red-hot steel. Evelyn was sweeping near the back wall, her hands already raw from work. The moment she saw Harvey's sharp eyes sweep the room, unease knotted in her stomach. "Samuel Pike," Harvey called, his voice honey-sweet but edged like a blade. "I hear you found yourself a helper. Remarkable. A man as hard to please as you, suddenly willing to tolerate company." Samuel's brow furrowed. He didn't pause long. "If you've got business, say it." Harvey smiled thinly, circling the forge as if inspecting property he intended to buy. His gaze flicked to Evelyn, lingering just long enough to make her shift uncomfortably. "The town's talking," he murmured. "A girl from the boarding house. No family, no standing, living and working here with you. Samuel, it doesn't exactly align with propriety." Evelyn's face burned. She lowered her eyes, heart pounding as those words sank in like stones. But Samuel's reply was flat and cold as steel. "She works hard, that's enough." Harvey's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "Enough for you, perhaps, but not enough for the law. And law, Pike, law is something I hold in my hands." He drew a folded paper from his coat and slapped it down on the anvil. "If this girl remains here without proper standing, the council could fine you heavy for violating our moral codes. I'm only here to warn you." Samuel's hand tightened on the hammer until the veins rose in his forearm. The forge seemed to hum with the tension, but Harvey was already turning away, his parting words smooth and sharp. "I can always help, so long as you're willing to cooperate. Refuse, and laughter will be the least of your worries." When his footsteps faded, the forge fell into silence. Evelyn stood trembling, fingers clutching the hem of her dress. Her voice cracked when she finally spoke. You'll be punished because of me." Samuel turned, his eyes fierce with fire. "No. He's the one who just asked for trouble." Then, for the first time, his calloused hand rested on her shoulder. It wasn't an order or a correction. It was a silent vow. A promise she wasn't alone anymore. But Evelyn understood. From this moment on, the fight wasn't just against cruel laughter. It was against Harvey Cole himself, a man who wielded law and money like weapons, and who would grind down the weak if no one stood in his way. Rumors spread through Iron Creek faster than chimney smoke on a winter evening. Within days of Harvey Cole's visit, the whole town was whispering about the blacksmith's shop. "They say Samuel Pike is sheltering some fat, simple girl," one voice muttered. Others laughed, embellishing crueler details. "Bet she works for free just to have a roof over her head." In the Rusty Spur Saloon, every mention of Evelyn's name was greeted with laughter and cheap jokes. On the street, merchants' wives clutched their skirts and turned away when she walked by, as if her shame might rub off on them. Evelyn kept her head low, clutching her basket close, her cheeks blazing with humiliation. But beneath the sting, something stirred inside her, a small, defiant spark. How could they decide my worth, when not one of them has seen what I can do? That night, in the small room behind the forge, Evelyn sat hunched near a dim oil lamp. Samuel placed a steaming bowl of stew in front of her and took the seat across the table. His gaze was steady, calm, but heavy with truth. "They'll keep talking," he said in that low, gravelly voice. "Harvey won't stop. He knows how to twist the law and people's tongues until they strangle the ones with no defense." Evelyn's hands trembled around the wooden spoon. At last she whispered, "If I left, maybe it would spare you all this trouble." Her words landed like a blade. Samuel slammed the bowl down, the fire in his eyes flaring. "You think I care more about comfort than about what's right?" His voice rumbled like iron striking steel. "You've done more here than any man I've hired. No one gets to turn you into a burden." Evelyn blinked, her eyes burning. His words weren't loud, but they melted through the wall of shame she'd carried for years. The very next day, Harvey Cole struck again. Standing before the town council, his voice dripped with honey but cut like a knife. "We cannot allow a girl with no family, no standing, to live under the same roof as a solitary man. It is an offense to morality and an insult to the order of Iron Creek." Some councilmen nodded in agreement. Others hesitated. Harvey pressed harder, flashing that sly smile. "Either Samuel Pike marries her, or she leaves town. If not, I'll demand a heavy fine for both of them." By that afternoon, Samuel had carried the news to Evelyn. She froze where she stood, her entire body rigid. Marriage, forced by scandal, or leave, and crawl back to the boarding house where laughter would crush her all over again. That night, the winter wind howled through the cracks in the forge walls. Evelyn sat alone, staring at her calloused hands, hands that had swept ashes, hauled iron, endured blistering days of labor. The echoes of cruel laughter mingled in her mind with Samuel's voice from the night before. "No one gets to turn you into a burden." Her chest rose with a slow, steady breath. For the first time in her life, she realized the choice was hers. Not Harvey's, not the town's. Hers alone. The day of the town council's hearing arrived beneath a sky heavy with snow. The air was sharp enough to cut skin, the clouds so thick it felt like Iron Creek itself was holding its breath, waiting for the storm. Folks crowded outside the small wooden hall, faces lit with the eager gleam of those who came not for justice, but for spectacle. Harvey Cole was the first to step forward. His long black coat trailed behind him, polished boots crunching in the frost, a crooked smile carved on his lips. His eyes glinted with the smug certainty of a man who believed the game already won. To him, this was never about morality. This was about power, about bringing Samuel Pike, the stubborn blacksmith, to his knees under the weight of law and shame. Then Samuel entered, broad-shouldered, towering. His very presence seemed to silence the crowd for a beat. He didn't glance left or right, just strode forward like a man walking into battle. And behind him came Evelyn Hart. Her dress was plain, her hands clenched tightly together to hide the trembling. But her chin was held high. The whispers spread through the onlookers like wildfire. There she is, disgraceful, living under his roof. Harvey's right. This has to be stopped. Evelyn's heart thundered, but she kept walking, refusing to shrink away this time. Inside the hall, Harvey rose to address the council, his voice smooth and loud. "Gentlemen, we gather here today to defend the honor of Iron Creek, a girl with no kin, no standing, living under the roof of Samuel Pike. This defies the order and decency we have sworn to protect." Evelyn bowed her head, her face burning with shame. But before Harvey could finish, Samuel's fist slammed against the council's table, his voice booming like a hammer striking steel. "She is no burden. She has worked harder than any man I've ever hired. Not Cole, not anyone else in this room, know her worth." The crowd murmured, torn between scandal and conviction. Harvey smirked, striking with the blade he'd prepared. "Then marry her, Pike. If you won't, she leaves Iron Creek. The law is the law." Evelyn's vision blurred. Marriage? As punishment? Or exile? The very thought twisted her stomach. She could leave, crawl back to the boarding house, to laughter and shame. Or she could stay, trapped in a union born of force, not choice. Her hands trembled, then slowly stilled. Evelyn stood, breath shaky, but voice steady. "If this town needs a title to make me worthy, then let me be plain. I did not come here for pity. I work in that forge because I want to prove I have value. And I have. If staying here requires marriage, then so be it. But I will not say yes just to silence a mob. She turned to Samuel, tears in her eyes but fire in her gaze. I will only say yes if you truly want me by your side. The room froze. Harvey's smirk faltered, his plan unraveling in his hands. Samuel's eyes softened, for the first time more ember than flame. His reply came slow, deliberate, and steady as an oath. Evelyn, I don't want you because of Harvey's threats or this town's gossip. I want you because I choose you. A wave of gasps swept through the chamber. Harvey tried to shout, but the weight of Evelyn's courage and Samuel's truth had shifted the room. Eyes that once judged now glimmered with something else. Respect. Beyond the window, the first flakes of snow began to fall. The storm was coming to Iron Creek. But inside Evelyn Hart, a storm had already passed. For the first time, her worth wasn't decided by their laughter. It was claimed by her own voice. That night, Iron Creek was swallowed by a storm unlike anything the town had ever seen. The wind howled like a beast through every crack in the walls, whipping shards of ice against the windows. Families huddled beneath quilts, whispering prayers that their roofs would still be standing by morning. Inside the forge, Samuel Pike fed more wood to the fire. The flames flared bright, casting his scarred face in a fierce glow. Across from him sat Evelyn Hart, hands wrapped around a steaming cup of tea he'd poured. Strands of her hair were damp with melting snow, but her eyes burned clearer than ever. Tomorrow. Evelyn's voice trembled beneath the storm's roar. If the council listens to Harvey, I may have to leave. Samuel froze, staring into the blaze. Then he turned, his voice rough, low as thunder. Evelyn, do you really think I'll let that happen? Her breath caught. Can you truly stand against Harvey's law? The law he twists is nothing but an excuse, Samuel said firmly. He moved closer, lowering himself to sit before her. The only thing that matters is this. Do you want to stay? The question stunned her. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, time seemed to still until there was only the two of them. Samuel, her voice cracked. No one has ever asked me that before. Since I was a child, they've only told me to hide, to be quiet, to disappear. But you're asking if I want to remain. He reached for her, his calloused hand closing around hers. His warmth pushed back the cold that clung to her bones. Then give me your answer, Evelyn. Not for Harvey. Not for the council. For me. Tears welled in her eyes, slipping hot against her frozen cheeks. She whispered, trembling, Yes, I want to stay. Not because I'm forced, but because here, for the first time, I feel I matter. Samuel's gaze softened, the fire in his eyes dimming into something steadier, deeper, like glowing embers. He drew a long breath, then spoke with deliberate weight. Then hear me now. No one will drive you out. And I don't want to call you just a worker. I want to call you my wife. Her heart lurched. She gasped, hand quivering in his grip. You'd truly marry me? Even when the whole town, they can laugh. Samuel cut in, his voice like steel. Let them. I'll laugh right back in their faces, with you at my side. A crack of thunderous ice rattled the forge, but Evelyn heard only her racing pulse and his unshakable tone. She sobbed and clutched his hand. If that's true, then yes. But promise me one thing. Stand with me as equals. I will not be pitied. A rare smile touched Samuel's lips, softened by firelight. I never pitied you, Evelyn. I choose you, because you are stronger than anyone I've ever known. And there, as the blizzard raged outside, two battered souls sat hand in hand, like iron hammered in flame, forged together, unbreakable. Morning broke over Iron Creek with a silence almost holy. The storm had passed, leaving the town buried beneath a sheet of untouched white. Snow lay heavy on rooftops, blanketed the streets, and swallowed the fields beyond. But inside the hearts of its people, another storm still churned. The one stirred up by gossip, law, and the name Evelyn Hart. When Samuel Pike and Evelyn stepped into the town square, every head turned. Samuel's stride was firm, each step crunching against the snow like iron on stone. He looked as immovable as the mountains themselves. Beside him walked Evelyn, her cheeks red from the cold, her eyes burning with something far stronger than shame. Wrapped in Samuel's heavy coat, she no longer looked like the joke from the boarding house. She looked like a woman stepping fully into her own place in the world. And waiting for them, of course, was Harvey Cole. He stood in front of the councilman, black coat pressed, his smirk sharp as a blade. His voice sliced through the frigid air. "Samuel Pike, so quick to parade her here. What is this? An attempt to legitimize your little farce?" The crowd rippled with whispers. Evelyn's chest tightened, but Samuel's hand closed around hers, solid, unshakable, like the grip of a man who'd already chosen. Samuel raised his voice, clear as a hammer striking steel. "This is no farce. I bring Evelyn here to say before all of Iron Creek, she is the one I choose, not out of pressure, not out of pity, but because I want her." The square went silent, the words hanging heavy as snowfall. Harvey let out a harsh laugh. "Choose her? A woman from a boarding house? No dowry, no name, no family? That's your way of spitting on tradition and law?" Before Samuel could answer, Evelyn stepped forward. The wind cut at her face, but her voice rang strong. "Mr. Cole, if I have no family name or wealth, then I know the value of work and honesty even more. I don't need you to tell me whether I'm worthy. I've proven it in the forge, and Samuel has seen it." Murmurs rose again, but this time the tone had shifted. From the back, a woman called out, "She's right. Who among you could do what she's done?" An old carpenter added, nodding firmly, "I've seen that forge. Never been cleaner. That girl works harder than 3 boys half her size." Harvey's jaw tightened. He could feel the tide turning, but he pressed on, voice sharp. "None of it matters. Law is law. If she stays under Pike's roof, there is only one way: marriage." Samuel didn't flinch. He turned to Evelyn, his eyes carrying no command, only truth. "I asked you last night in the storm. Now I ask again, here, before this town. Evelyn, will you be my wife? Not because they demand it, but because it is your choice." The crowd held its breath. Evelyn looked at him, the grizzled blacksmith who had given her respect where others gave scorn. Her eyes blurred with tears, but her voice was steady as the ringing of an anvil. "Yes, I will." The square erupted, but this time it wasn't cruel laughter. It was astonishment, murmurs of respect, and the first glimmers of acceptance. Harvey Cole turned away, jaw clenched in defeat. And there, in the snow-covered square, Evelyn Hart ceased to be a punchline. She became proof that even the mocked, the underestimated, the ridiculed can rise, carry the weight of their own fate, and find a love worthy of their strength. Winter in Iron Creek eventually loosened its grip. Snow melted into trickling streams that wound their way through town, carrying with them the last traces of cruel whispers that once clung to Evelyn Hart's name. No one called her a joke anymore. When folks saw her walking beside Samuel Pike, their eyes carried respect. For she had proved, with her own hands and unshakable will, that a woman once mocked could rise and build something greater. Inside Samuel's modest cabin, firelight glowed against rough timber walls. At the long table, Samuel's scarred hands held plans and scraps of paper, while Evelyn bent over the page, her brown hair falling across her shoulder, pen trembling yet steady. "Schoolhouse," she whispered, as though afraid to break the fragile dream. "And a clinic," Samuel added, his deep voice carrying the weight of a vow. They weren't planning just for themselves. They were planning for Iron Creek, for the children who deserved to learn without shame, for the women who shouldn't have to choose between hunger and humiliation, for every soul in town who needed a place to heal and to hope. Evelyn knew that if she had been given such a place long ago, her path might have been different. Now, she would help carve that path for others, When their wedding day came, the whole town gathered beneath the great oak tree by the stream. It wasn't grand. No chandeliers, no velvet gowns, just wildflowers scattered by children's hands, a plain white dress Evelyn had sewn herself, and an old suit Samuel dusted off for the occasion. But when he took her hand, he looked like the richest man alive. Even Harvey Cole stood in the crowd, his presence more shadow than threat. Once, he'd wielded whispers and law like weapons. Now, stripped of his schemes, he was only a bitter spectator. Samuel didn't look his way. Nothing could touch the happiness of this day. As the minister spoke blessings over them, Evelyn turned to Samuel and murmured words meant only for him. No one ever believed a woman like me could carry anything. But together, we'll show them, won't we? Samuel's rare smile broke through like sunlight after storm. We'll show them everything. Cheers erupted. Children tossed wildflowers skyward. And in that moment, Evelyn shed the last remnants of mockery. She was no longer the girl they laughed at. She was Samuel Pike's wife. She was the woman who had stood tall against ridicule and chosen her own destiny. That evening, they hung a carved wooden sign over their cabin door. It read, "A new home, where dreams begin for Iron Creek." The story ends here, but not really. For tomorrow, the schoolhouse will rise, the clinic's lamps will glow, and the town will be reshaped, not by laws or laughter, but by the courage of two people who found each other in the storm. This was their new beginning. And for Iron Creek, it was only the first page of a longer tale. And now I'll turn to you. If life placed you between scorn and survival, would you retreat to the past or seize the present to build something lasting? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit like if you believe love can rewrite destiny. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story from the Wild West, where every storm, every hand clasp, and every choice can become a legend.